The next block we're going to tackle is the edge block that's on the border CD. To do our edge block for the border CD, you're going to need your backing fabric, you're going to need your background fabric 1 and a background fabric 2, and you will also need a fabric from your stash. And you'll also need thread B and thread C, and of course water-soluble thread and some type of temporary spray adhesive, either KK2000 or the 505 spray. Now I've already done step 1, and that of course is to hoop your vandalizer, and then you're going to go ahead and get the design on the machine and have it stitch out step 1, which is basically a pattern onto the vandalizer. Okay, I have my first stash fabric on here, and on this side we're going to trim it a scant 1/4 inch, and then over here we're going to also do the same thing. Now I just used a small piece of fabric. Your instructions call for a long strip of fabric. So if you had a long strip of fabric, you then would have an angle to be able to use for the next block, which is what we have here. This is why my background piece of fabric, I've already cut at a 45-degree angle. Like I said, if you've used this fabric already on this section on a different block, you already have your angle cut. But if you're using this strip of fabric for the first time, you'll need to, with a ruler, cut at a 45-degree angle, which you'll be able to do with our new Trimmer by George 2, which has a ruler on it. So I'm going to place the fabric just right sides, right over the previous piece of fabric. The machine will then stitch a seam, so you'll have neutral thread in the needle, and then you'll flip it over. These are upcoming steps, so it'll be just like that. So let me go sew that seam on there and we'll actually flip it. Okay, the machine has stitched the seam. Now we're going to flip the fabric over. And the next thing we do is put water-soluble thread in the needle only, and it's going to sew a tack down stitch. Okay, I've completed step 4, which is a tack down stitch here for this piece of fabric. I'm going to trim it a scant 1/4 inch on the inside of the block. And then for step 5, I'm going to put a neutral thread back in my needle only, and I'm going to take my other piece of background fabric, which was a 10 by 10 inch square cut diagonally, and I'm going to lay it down, right sides down, raw edges even, and the machine will stitch a seam. Okay, for step 5, that's finished. We're going to go ahead and flip the fabric and finger press it. And for step 6, you're going to put your water-soluble thread in the needle, and the machine's going to sew a stitch to tack all that down. Okay, they've completed step 6, and it has stitched a basting stitch to hold that fabric down. For step number 7, we're going to turn this over. We're going to take our backing fabric, and we're going to spray the back side of it with temporary spray adhesive, and then center it over the block. You're going to still leave your water-soluble thread in the needle, and it's going to stitch a basting stitch to hold that to the back of the block.
Go.
For step 8, we're going to do the quilting up in this area right here, and the quilting has been digitized by Master Quilter Sharon Schomburg this year, and so we're going to put thread B in the needle only. You should already have thread B in the bobbin. If not, make sure you have both thread B in the bobbin and the needle, and we'll go ahead and stitch the quilting. Now that we have our backing fabric on, a couple tips that I wanted to remind you about is if your machine has an automatic thread cutter, it's great sometimes, but right now you need to turn it off. Anytime you have your backing fabric, if you turn it off and you bring your bobbin thread through to the top of the block before you start stitching your quilting, you'll have a much more finished look on the back without any rats or thread tails or threads hanging out. So don't forget to do that in the rest of the steps in this block. For step 9, we're going to take our thread C and we're going to put it in the needle end in the bobbin, and it's going to stitch out more quilting by our guest Master Quilter Sharon Schomburg. This is our completed edge border block. This is the front of it, and there's the back.